Hi. I thought we'd begin. And I think let's just go around the room and say your name again. I know we all know each other, but there'll probably be people who don't know us. And one thing you're looking forward to in the summer. That should be easy. So we'll start with Linda.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. One thing we're looking for.
Forward to in the summer.
In the summer. Okay. Hi, I'm Linda Holman, and one thing that I'm looking forward to in the summer is warm weather, but not hot weather. So you can enjoy it and function in it, and it doesn't kill you.
Bella can't get in.
Oh, is she the number?
I don't know. Gonna try and fix it. Somebody else, let's just popcorn, anybody, who's next?
I'll go next. I'm Tamara Erickson, and I am looking forward to hanging out at the Civic Club.
Great.
And Brian, what's your background?
Kauai.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Brian Saunders. And, you know, I don't even have to go to the summer to look forward to this, but so I recently, and this is the first time in my life, I got an ingrown toenail and it hurts like hell. So I'm just looking forward to that clearing up and healing and just moving on with my life because it is painful.
Yeah, people don't realize something that small could be that awful.
Well, it's my big toe, so it's not small.
Yeah.
I got to grant you that, but
I was trying to be nice, Brian.
All relative.
Yeah.
So moving right along, I'll cover the rest of the Zoom posts. I am looking forward to in about a bit over a month being in New Hampshire and having my annual fried clam, fried onion ring, French fry, and chocolate frap at the Ice House in Newcastle, New Hampshire.
There
Best
you go.
place in the world for fried clams and fried onion rings, and it makes you happy to not eat them any other time because you know when you eat it, it's going to be worth it.
Okay. Matt, how about you?
My name is Matt, and I am thinking of, I mean, there's a lot of things. I'm looking forward to jumping in the lake when it's warm enough, and it's not. I saw some kids jumping in the lake the other day, and I checked the Lake Washington temperature, and it was like 57. I was like, it's bold, a little too bold for me, but I'm looking forward to when it's
They're young.
warmer than 57 in the lake.
Did you see that thing where it told you how fast you died from jumping in the lake?
Um,
Oh, it was in the paper on Sunday.
Yeah.
Yeah, quickly.
That toenail thing started.
Yes.
I guess I'll go. since
Yeah.
we're going around.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mimi Bertram, I'm just looking forward to being outside in every which way possible all summer.
I'm Dana Campbell, and I'm looking forward to a driving trip down to Coos Bay, Oregon, where my kid is gonna be doing an internship, and I'm gonna go. I haven't been to Coos Bay.
I'm looking forward to being on a boat on the Salish Sea.
What kind of book?
Nordic tug.
Oh, I love those.
I'm Tracy Bertani. I'm the council liaison to this committee. And what I'm looking forward to is hopefully sometime this summer, the natural gas ban actually coming to fruition.
Corey, you have to play.
Corey Road, City of Lake Forest Park. I'm looking forward to warm days on the water with my dog and friends,
Terrific.
being outside. Is Bella the phone number?
I don't know. I mean,
I'm gonna allow.
her in and see. Then you can throw her out, right? Bella, can you hear us, Bella? I'm gonna give you my phone and you can type it back. So we'll want to look at the agenda, and what the agenda is we're gonna look at some it's the same as always, minutes agenda, minutes, citizen comment, new business. Then we're gonna focus on the climate action committee stuff that we've written, and then reports from our committees and your chair. Is there anything, any objections or changes you want to make to the agenda? Okay. And the minutes, did anybody, did people have a chance to read the minutes? And is there anybody who has read them who would like to move the minutes?
I did, and I will. I moved.
There a second? Okay, Linda. Okay, any objection to accepting the minutes? I think they were pretty straightforward. Okay, do we have citizen comments?
Please raise your hand if you want to make a comment. You have to. Okay, no one raised their hands. So.
Okay. So I think the new business is you, Corey, right?
Oh, yes, so gas and electric lawn equipment, Jeff is just suggesting that you guys propose an ordinance to ban these and to take this to council. I sent Sarah and Tracy some links, and I'll send it out to the rest of the group, but looking at other local cities that maybe have done it and taking what they've done and seeing what we can do and start putting that together before the climate action plan is adopted. But we can probably get that moving quicker, so.
Jeff Johnson.
Jeff Perigo, the public works director.
And what would the ordinance would say? There no, you can't buy them or you can't sell them. Can't use them.
Well, I think that would kind of be up to you guys of doing a little bit of research, seeing what cities have done and what's working. The link that he sent, I haven't looked fully through it, but it might have a couple of suggestions of people who have done it. So I'll send that out again. But there's a hand over there.
Oh, go ahead. Whose hand is it?
So, I haven't looked at it yet, but my first thought would be to probably do some sort of buyback program for people so that they could buy other appliances. And then also, just how would that work? Like if you have landscapers coming in, you don't necessarily know they're using it. And I guess you could say like you have to use it, but how do you know if they're using it? And is there any sort of penalty if you do use, or it's an honor system, or how does I can look in?
I think that's the way to approach this question, and let's spend just a few minutes. What are your concerns? We'll write them down and then we'll put that aside, and Tracy and whoever is interested in sort of looking at this would take those into consideration. Does that work?
Yeah, and like we've talked a little bit, like we would be able to do like a full buyback program without grant funds, but maybe something like whoever's like discounted for sewer services, like that level can go, we can do some sort of buyback helping program for that, but yeah.
Okay. So what are other issues, Anne?
Yeah, there's also just the natural attrition rate. If you own a weed whacker, it doesn't last for a decade.
Right.
It doesn't. And if you just shut off the spigot and don't allow new gasoline powered or fossil fuel powered appliances, in 10 years we're there. And there may be a handful of people who hang in for the full 10 years and keep that lawnmower going, but really not that many when you come right down to it. The equipment, some of the equipment like weed whackers, leaf blowers, weed whackers will just attrition out. Leaf blowers we may want to hop on because they're such a sound nuisance.
Mm-hmm.
And then lawnmowers, again, some kind of a phased incentive would make sense because those are somewhat more durable.
Okay. Okay, Brian, you had something?
I have two questions. One to kind of follow up on Anna. It's actually quite encouraging. If you go down to Ace, they sell mostly electronic only battery powered stuff. I mean, it really is kind of fun to see. But I was actually, my question was about the city. Does the city not already have a phase out plan for just the maintenance workers in the city? Aren't they already working on that? Am I delusioned?
Yeah, yeah, like if anything, we'll be buying electric.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, battery.
Yeah.
So,
what
so
I-
that, what the mayor was asking for us to phase out all in Lake Forest Park, not just the city's stuff, then it's
Right.
just, okay.
Wasn't the mayor.
It's
right?
not the mayor,
Yeah,
it's
Public Works.
Public Works. guy.
Oh, public works, okay.
People who put those on their back, the blowers on their back.
Mhm.
Are there other issues that so I had what we had, Ann,
Yeah, there are three groups. There's the municipal agencies, the mayor's taking care of that. There's residents. Well, that's what the code should focus on mostly, but there's also contractors.
Yeah.
There's actually quite a lot of contractors.
Mhm.
And if we're going to make a change like this that affects contractors, I guess Corey, you can answer, do we license landscapers? Because I know I can't have somebody come take down a tree in Lake Forest Park without them having a permit to do business in Lake Forest Park. How about landscapers?
Yeah, I would assume that they are required to have a business license.
So as a part of the business licensing process, that's where we would put it for, also for anyone working on trees. And that's, chainsaws, there are really effective, larger electric chainsaws now, and there aren't a whole lot of trees. I mean, we can set it up so that there can be exceptions on a needs basis.
Yeah.
Because if you actually do have old growth that needs to come down because it's a dangerous tree, you may not have an electric chainsaw that can cope with that. You may just have to go with whatever gas powered saw you got. And that can be done on a tree by tree basis, literally. But a lot of the little stuff, electric chainsaws have been doing great for a long time, so.
okay, so what I have is concerns are the buyback program and discounts, landscapers, what penalties, sort of the issue around attrition, sound. I thought Ace Selling might be providing discounts, right, or something like that, maybe they could do that. City phase out plan, the municipal residents and contractors are the three issues. Linking it to the business license and include chainsaws and trees.
I have one other thought, so, or two, actually. One is that I keep coming back to this idea of the tool organization of having something in Lake Forest Park where residents could borrow tools.
The tool pool.
The tool pool. And another is I just saw that the city of Seattle banned gas powered things a year ago. Gas powered. So it would be good.
So say-
Contractor community is going to be changing over because city after city is going to, we can actually do a sideways ban by limiting the noise pollution of some of these tools. And the only tools that will meet the noise requirements will be the electric tools.
So the problem is you have to police it too, right?
It's easy to police. It's easier to police noise than it is to go over and get a close up of the backpack the guy's wearing.
Gonna do it.
If
Yeah.
it's loud, it's a gas.
Okay, and so, all right, I do want to talk about this, but it's not the only thing I want to talk about. Tracy?
Say one thing, Shoreline has came to me like just today, so hopefully this will work out, but going on a grant program for some sort of tool, like rental system, so.
That would be awesome.
Actually, that was my comment was, yeah, are any nearby cities basically going to be doing this sort of thing? Since it seems to be the thing to do now.
There is one down in, oh wait, Matt, you know.
Lake City, yeah, the Northeast Seattle to a library we belong to. It's really nice.
And you just pay a yearly fee, which isn't very much, right?
So-
And then your number.
Is it a nonprofit or is it run through the city?
It's a nonprofit.
Nice. Yeah, because one thing I thought of was going through KCLS, right, our library.
Yeah,
Because in LA, libraries actually are libraries of other things besides books. So,
are they have tools?
yes.
You need to have space for it. as
Yep.
well.
And so they're using like formerly stack space for, library lending out other things, which is a comment, but whatever.
Do we have that space for that?
I don't know, but it's something you may want to bring up.
Yeah.
Well, I should say, I've contacted them about whether or not if we purchased, induction heat pumps, what are they called? Hot plates,
So
hot plates, if they would rent those out. I'm in the process of seeing if the library would do that for us
Oh.
before I brought that here, but we'll see if, so can we all have your whole back room for tools? Would be the next step, right?
And I'd say we don't have to necessarily worry so much about enforcement because it all falls under code enforcement, right?
Yeah, that would.
I got one more thing to add too, is like the leaf blower should discourage them because, it provides such an important habitat for like little critters. So it's another point that we can stress. Discourage leaf blowers in general.
That's gonna be a hard push. But
Not ban it, but just discourage it. 'Cause some people might not even like think about it, right? That by,
Yep.
blowing the leaves around, making it look pretty, it's actually not the best for all of the little critters and creatures that they like.
okay, this does not mean if you have an insight that you can't send them to Tracy or to me, and we'll figure this out. Is there anybody who specifically like to work with Tracy on it? I volunteered you, but okay.
That's fine.
To work with Tracy on developing this?
I'd be interested.
There you go. Dana will do that.
Thank you.
Okay. And,
Of course, I'm not a very good collaborator.
Yeah.
Brian can attest.
okay.
He's still smiling.
Still great. So we did want to do a quick briefing on the Green Fair. And sort of what we learned about being in a Green Fair. So what did we learn? That's the question. No, that's not the first question. The first question is, how many people do you think came to our booth?
Right, didn't you say it was like a
I
modern?
got rid of over 150 of one item.
So
and
probably,
that- So in one.
Was it about the same sort of the same sort of flow throughout the day?
Yeah, they got a little sparser towards the end.
After one, certainly got really
Yeah.
sparse.
I mean, I'm gonna say I thought it was a decent attendance for the nicest day of the year so far. I also say I will be pushing it back to earlier in the year. More organizations will be able to come back to back for events for organizations. It's hard to staff booths, but
yeah.
you live and learn.
So what were the kinds of things we learned about our booth? Because we're gonna be doing more booths. What do we need?
Or seat.
I have the email up. I can read it.
I'm sorry, Tamara, I didn't hear you.
Oh, I have the email up that you put together with like
Oh,
our
brilliant.
suggestions. Yeah, so Brian said more composting pencils. Mimi said giveaways are important. We did well there, but most people don't want to read anything, so simplify the messaging on the poster even more and make words and pictures really big. As Sarah wrote, make the posters bigger. I said the pencils were a big hit, so thank you, Sarah. And I agree with Mimi's comments too. Seed bombs, but at those events where it makes sense for people to stop and make them, because I understand when it made sense, the Green Fair.
So we have a couple of things that are coming up soon, I guess. We have a garden tour. We have a booth at the garden tour. And we have we have farmers market twice. We're trying to get those dates set up. So we'll try and pass that on to Tamara for the comms team to look at.
Okay, now I can give you guys some giveaways and stuff for those events too.
Can you get us pencils?
Sure.
Our seed pencils?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
You get them branded with our.
Yes,
All
Our logo.
okay. So what we did, I found I got pencils for Christmas that you planted, that the seeds grew out of, and that's what they're talking about here about the giveaway. And people liked them and they took them.
And it was terrible that our name was on it. So,
You can get them branded.
yes.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna stop now. And we're gonna look at I would like to say how much progress we made in the last month on the climate action plan. That the teams really did a lot of work, and I think we're actually closing in on a product. I was so excited, I asked them what we should do when we're done. And they said we'd make a presentation to the council essentially in a work session. They give us some feedback and then we'd go do some more things. And is that right?
Yeah.
I didn't get
Yeah,
quite
they
get
do
it right.
like public open house,
Yeah.
Mm.
gather input, regroup, then bring it back to council for adoption.
Right. So that, I got so excited because it seemed like it was actually on the horizon. So I thought what we would do, and this is, first of all, I want to tell you, I'm giving you an impossible assignment. So you're ready for that? I'm asking you to look at, and talk with us through your section in, well, I said set in 7 minutes. So just, and again, what we want to do is be able to use the flag function. We're not editing at this point, where this is about content, I think. So if you have questions or issues, we want to use the comments section. What do they call it? Comments on the side. So, so I just had it up there and I just lost it. Okay, yeah, I did it. Okay, I'm gonna find it again and share it.
It's in one of those emails you sent them.
I know.
The most
Oh, I had it
recent
up.
one.
Let's
Corey's.
Google Docs,
All
right?
right, Bella, since we're here, do you want to say something about your excitement for summer? We all said something we're excited about for summer.
Yeah, I heard that. I was the silly random phone number because I couldn't figure out how to get my Zoom to work. I I'm going to camp this summer again, which I'm very excited about. And hopefully, me and my camp friends are trying to road trip to Oregon to see Willie Nelson. So hopefully that works out, and I'm just looking forward to spending time with my friends before college. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, I'm now gonna share the document, I think. And I'm on page, share, I'm on page 15, I think it is. It's the priorities, the priority areas. And Anne, we're gonna put the timer on for you, Anne.
Got it. And so obviously what we're trying to do with transportation is look at how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions that are generated by transportation. And one of the first overarching concepts we have to recognize is that our community is located at a transportation hub that has been a transportation hub as long as there have been people in this area, because it had two major salmon-bearing streams discharging to Lake Washington at a place where the lake shore was also accessible. So this has always been a transportation hub. What we are left with today, following European colonization and the development of the area to a residential, mostly residential community by design, which is unusual in this area, is a city that is bisected now by Highway 522 and State Road 104. We've grown on all sides of these. So keep scrolling, Sarah. So our first strategy is to increase transition to electric vehicles. And we will have to define an actual goal that we're working towards. But one of the primary sources of emissions in our community is vehicles. The secondary source of, or the second other major source is buildings. But with vehicles, what we have are a lot of single family housing units, and those single family housing units have single occupancy vehicles. And many of them. So to the degree that we can transition from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles, we are stepping in the right direction. Things that we need to do, obviously connect with the municipality, provide opportunities for the community to learn about EVs. Charging. Range anxiety is a real thing. And we have no ability for people to charge their car in Lake Forest Park except at that house. So we need to discuss whether or not that's sufficient and what people can do if they live in multifamily housing that may not, I live in a house where I can simply install a charging station. If you live in a different in a multifamily housing or a condo, you may not have that flexibility. So we need to learn what would be required to provide the charging that's necessary at a household or residential basis. And we can also look at improving our zoning so that any new housing or retrofitted housing at least has the wiring in place so installation of a unit is easy. They may not want to go the extra $300 and put the unit in, but they can at least install the wiring so that the next step is really accessible to the next homeowner. Next, mass transit. We want to increase Lake Forest Park transit ridership and reduce single occupancy vehicle commuting. This is going to piggyback a lot onto the Sound Transit build out. And Sound Transit right now is planning for some nice large transit stations in our community that will allow people easy access on and off the bus. That can also benefit as the community increases its density, more people will want to use that alternative. Right now, the bus ridership is focused on our two main highways. And so how we get people to those transit routes becomes more of a problem, because if a person, in my case, for instance, I would have to walk a mile to get to a bus station on one of those routes. I only have to walk 2 blocks to go to a bus station to the north, but it doesn't get me onto that route very easily. So how do we get me from my house to that bus without having me park my car at that bus stop? That's a question that we have to be creative about solving, and it may be a combination of tools. The electric jitney, some form of bike transit, maybe improve transit through our community by collaborating with our transit authorities. And next, Sarah.
Okay, I just have to tell you, I added the missing middle in there.
Yeah, the missing middle is, that's going to be a serious issue for us all, especially if we increase density throughout our community. That leaves even more people that are not close to these transit routes. So how we do that becomes an important question, and how we provide those connection points. One of those connection points, and I only have 2 minutes left, is improving walking and biking access throughout the city. Right now, I have no sidewalk access to a bus stop in any direction. I have streets with 25 and 30 mile an hour speed limits and no sidewalks, and a fog line between me and whoever happens to be driving the ton of steel towards me. So doing things to improve street safety for pedestrians and bicycles will go a long way towards meeting a wide variety of our goals, not the least of which is getting people out of their cars and into transit. And to keep scrolling, so there are a number of specific tasks we'd like to look at with this that would improve street safety, but I don't have time to get into them. So we'll just keep going. And reducing greenhouse gas emissions with respect to businesses. The big one that we can look at is business travel. If a person has their business in Lake Forest Park, they've eliminated their business travel. Yay. However, if that person who has their business in Lake Forest Park plans on taking several annual trips to business meetings all over the world, because that's one of the high points of their year, is the meeting with their professional colleagues in Florence that doubles up as a vacation, then that's business travel that is very greenhouse gas inefficient. One of the things we're looking at is trying to encourage people to have meetings locally, separate their vacations and their business, and have their business locally and also have their vacations locally. There's a lot you can do within range of an EV that's really fun here in Washington and would also improve our economy here in Washington. And Sarah, is there, I think we're about there. Yeah, the off-road vehicles and yard and garden tools. This ties into what we were discussing earlier today with Corey. What can we do to incentivize people to switch to battery operated in all these? That's my 7 minutes. I'll stop.
Excellent. Speedy. Okay, what is all this? Okay, this is Matt and Tracy. Who's doing this? You guys, I'm putting my timer in.
Well, we're probably not going to go to it because unfortunately I have not had time in the last couple days since Tracy and I met to really dig into this. The biggest issue that we identified was, we got some pushback from people about, if we convert to electric heating, electric stoves, how are we going to fare in power outages? And there's a number of different tactics we can take for that. Everything from encouraging people to, go with like a portable solar battery instead of like a gasoline generator for power outages, or something even like a community solar installation that would provide emergency power for those power outages. And I think that's the biggest thing that we might just have to leave it up to, figuring out later during implementation what we're going to have budget for or what's going to make sense. But the gist of it is, like we discussed before, converting businesses and homes that are on fossil fuel heating to electric. Does anybody have any other thoughts or like concerns that they see besides the power outages question?
No, but I think you can use your EV, right?
Yeah.
To power your house.
But I mean, not for super long.
Not all of them. A number of them say don't do that.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to that is we also talked about community-wide storage somehow too, right? Where you could literally have banks of batteries someplace that feed back into various circuits around like Forest Park. And when there's a power outage, as they restore power, we don't necessarily have to rely on city of Seattle to supply it. We could have these battery backups. So
But, and let me just say, these are your strategies are electrify, it's sort of electrify everything. Is that it?
pretty much.
That's
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, what's the alternative?
right. Yeah.
I mean,
And it's very, I'm sorry, but it's one of the things we have to deal with is people's individual experience about something. I mean, I came across this, well, I have to have an electric fireplace because maybe this will go out and maybe. But it's people's personal experience.
Yeah, it's exactly.
Even the other way around, right? They want a gas fire.
They want a gas, I'm
Right.
sorry, I can't talk. They want a gas fireplace because
Well,
it might go out.
it's
right?
like the range anxiety that
Yeah.
he's talking about. It's
Yeah.
like people have real power outage anxiety,
Yes,
which is not made up. We deal with a lot of power outages, and so we're going to need to have something to address that to assuage people's fears before they are going to buy into electrifying.
This is where I wanted to ask a question for you, which is there basically, since Shoreline has already adopted these kinds of ordinances, and I know it doesn't affect single family homes, but are they keeping track of what happens during power outages?
A little bit louder, please, Tracy.
So in the past winter, Shoreline experienced a significant number of power outages, and they've already adopted a lot of the ordinances we're thinking about here. And so the point is, do they keep track of like what happens to folks basically when they in fact run out of power for days in Shoreline? Does your counterpart know any of that stuff?
I don't know.
Okay.
So we can ask, I'm assuming that's probably the power companies.
Mhm.
I just in thinking about that question, I would wonder, because a lot of these codes are new constructions, need to be, so people who have been living in their home for some amount of time, the people who are going to have the strongest opinion about power outages are, not going to be in that category of people who just moved into a newly built house, and the people who are buying the newly built houses are gonna be like, oh, well, it's electric. And they're not gonna realize until like a year or two in that house, that like, oh man, there are power outages here, maybe we need a generator or something. So I think that the people who have the strongest opinions are not in the group of the people who like just bought a new building.
And
Yeah, I live in a house where we've just converted off of an oil furnace. And the oil furnace required electricity both to ignite the oil and burn the oil. And also to operate the fan that distributed the heat through the house. So my oil furnace required electricity, and we had to start a generator up to run the oil furnace. And the house we had before across the street was on natural gas. The gas stove had a piezoelectric unit that was used to light the gas. So during power outages, we had to be incredibly careful, because that unit doesn't work when there's no power, and we could light the gas, but at least once we again ran an electric cord out the door and powered it with a generator because we had our Thanksgiving turkey in, and the oven didn't work without the electric element. So when people are complaining that they are self-sufficient without electricity during power outages, I question that. There may be some few, but my personal experience is that it's not everyone, and that electrical backup by means of a generator is pretty common for even houses that are on gas or oil tanks.
okay, Tamara.
I mean, I personally am very grateful for my gas fireplace and my gas stove during power outages so that I can heat my house and cook my food, because I don't need the electricity in order to use those. But obviously I would rather not have it. So I think it is something to consider. And I think to Matt's point, if I were to move into a new house, because where I grew up in Phoenix, we didn't have gas. It was all electric. So you just didn't have it during power outages, and you just dealt with it. And it wasn't a big deal. So yeah, I think requiring it for new construction is one thing. I'm not sure how many people would say, oh no, I'm not moving into Lake Forest Park because I can't have, a gas stove or a gas fireplace, especially when so many of the neighboring cities, are doing that also. So I don't think it's going to be a deal breaker for someone. It's not going to build their house in LFP. So I think it just comes into whether we start making a requirement for people to get rid of their existing, I think will be a lot more challenging.
Right,
Yeah.
when it
Exactly.
breaks.
Yeah, we're talking about two separate questions of like, banning it in new constructions, which again, there's not really a demographic that's representing those people because they're moving.
They're not here yet.
So that's good, you're not gonna get a lot of pushback on that, but kind of like with the electric tools, it's like if you want to, ban it in existing buildings, there would need to be some sort of phased approach where it'd be over, 5-10 years.
And that's not our say so anyway, that's the state.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna hustle us along, and Linda, I think it's you.
Apparently that's the case. Okay, so we'll start with consumption, and our goals were to prevent unnecessary waste. And since we only met once, we didn't get into how many details, and reduce food miles. So if I'm going to talk as fast as I can and get through this, locally sourced food can be more expensive to purchase. That's true. If you look at the farmer's market, it's not always a bargain. And the way we get people through there and allow them to shop there, people on limited income, is through the market bucks. But that's only one little piece of it. And the other next issue, many people do not have the land to grow their own food, especially multifamily residents. And that can be looked at in some senses, but people can do things on their balcony or patio or whatever. A lot of these things are things that are looking at educating the public as to what's available and achievable. Promoting local food to reduce food miles is, again, we talked about, not always achievable. Local tap water needs to be filtered for best drinking water. And I believe that what I recall from Lake Forest Park Water is their water is somehow filtered and is better than other tap water, but I don't want to speak to that for sure because I'm not sure if that's really the case. And also, that's another issue. People can't always afford to do their own personal water filter system in their home. So our strategies here are education, raise awareness of the carbon footprint of consumer goods for food and so forth. And here we have Albertsons have and promote mesh bags for fruits and vegetables. I'm not sure that they're doing that. And one of the things that we didn't get to that is another thing to look at is if you shop in Trader Joe's, which of course is not an LFP, they have on rolls in the produce section, compostable bags, which is another way for people to access that without putting out money to purchase these vegetable bags if that's something that they can't really do. Local restaurants using dishes that are washable when eating in. We were going to look further into that. I know that at the Commons, some of those restaurants used to have a lot more dishes that were regular dishes that you could you put in bins and they took them back and washed them. I'm not seeing that much of those anymore, so I don't know what's changed there, but that's clearly another issue to look at. We didn't speak a lot about raising awareness of the junk mail. There used to be lists that you could get from the post office where you could sign up and they would have your list to not deliver junk mail to you. You would have to do it periodically, go back and upgrade it or renew it. I'm not even aware if those things are continuing to exist anymore. Here we said support the farmers market as a source of sustainable local food. So I kind of touched on that a little bit. We didn't really talk about promote reduction of meat, but on a personal basis, I've had a lot of experience talking to people about that and the attempts to get people to understand potential benefits of plant-based diets. And it's probably harder than getting them to give up their leaf blowers because people do not believe that they could eat a healthy diet without meat. And I'm not going to get started on that because that gets.
Yep, your time is ticking away.
Oh my God. Okay. Grow your own food. Okay. We talked about that. Develop more community or multifamily residential gardens. That is, again, something that could be discussed at a later date. Education on the healthy water supply, no need for plastic water bottles. Am I going to have time to get into the solid waste or?
You are.
Okay. Divert waste from landfills, reduce per capita waste generation, promote reuse of materials. So challenges are lack of clarity on what is recyclable and compostable, and rules change with services and municipalities. And I have found out personally that a number of things that Republic will tell you one time is recyclable, later you find that it isn't. So there's definitely confusion out there about how that works. Some local businesses are not using compostables. And these are things we just started to touch on, so we didn't really get deeply into how to do that. Access for recycling and compost for multifamily residents and schools, which I think is another really big issue, that there are some strategies that can be done there. Convenient locations for recycling non-curbside items. And we did just have the ion lithium battery fair, which we're looking at permanent places in the area where these things can be dropped off 24/7 and taken care of. So strategies, increasing compost and recycling provide expanded education on what can go into the bins, better signage. People at third place books on, oh, I'm not sure, I don't want to read that because I'm not sure on that. School programs, raise awareness about compostable containers and plastic bags, work with Republic Services to focus on multifamily schools and businesses to ensure proper composting and recycling. Ensure that commercial and restaurants are actually composting and recycling. Require garbage services provide to report card of diversion, or I'm not clear on either. Service provider create, publish material in easy to read format on how to divert materials correctly. Did I make it through the 7 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's a lot, obviously, there's a lot to talk about, but off the top of my head, clearly I feel and have felt all along here that a great deal of this hinges on proper and appropriate education of the community. And there's a lot of ways to do that, and we haven't touched on them yet since we're just going with this. So if anybody has anything to jump in there and add, I'd be happy to hear it.
Or post them on the thing. Matt.
Okay, yes, right, exactly. Great.
Yeah, I just added a little note about, there was an item on clothing resale, and, lately, like thrifting and, buying things secondhand through like buy nothing groups or like Facebook Marketplace has become all the rage among the youths. And that's, I think, something that we really want to be doing PR around, like trying to discourage this, like, oh, buying stuff secondhand is for poor people. Like,
Well, we actually have some place right in the mall, which is true, Two Trading Tigers,
yeah,
where they sell recycled clothing. And I was in there earlier and there's a lot of clothes in there. So unfortunately, it's not moving the way it could, but it's, at least they're making an effort, to start it.
and not just clothing, but like appliances, like a lot of people.
Yes,
Never
exactly.
buy a new toaster, because there's always toasters at Goodwill.
We need toys, and even places outside of Lake Forest Park, like there's a shop in Edmonds, like a kid's toy store and clothing store.
Mhm. Yeah.
You highlight all of those around.
If we could add to our presentation stuff for fairs, a buy nothing, find out where the buy nothing things are, and everybody knows about that. And have a link to it.
Okay.
Or have something like a farmer's market where people could do that kind of an exchange.
I think Anne had her hand up.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest confusions about recycling comes in the area of plastics.
Oh,
Many years ago, the plastics industry developed and required that everybody put on every plastic container what's called a resin identification code that has a number between 1 and 6.
Right.
And they decided that the code would always be inside a triangle that looks like a recycling symbol, but is not. And this was a PR move by the plastics industry to make people think that plastics were recyclable by putting a code on every plastic package, lid, and container, suggesting that the material was recyclable and that the code meant something about how recyclable it was. In fact, it's just a resin identification code, has nothing to do with the recycling. Virtually none of the plastics we use are recyclable. They never have been. And a lot of the market that we had was taking plastics to China that were then either improperly disposed of or burned for energy. So part of the recycling confusion is that we have not really clearly, we all thought it would work. And in fact, it only works for a few things that we generate. And
So you want to
educating people on that.
A little bit more education on plastic.
Yeah, so that we are dealing with reality and not the happy image that we think is reality.
And I think the PR around like the reduce, reuse, recycle, like are orders of magnitude apart.
Right.
right, like it takes an order of magnitude more energy to recycle something than it just to just reuse it. And I think people do not know that.
Well, another thing to think about is, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Ridwell, who came along, and one of the things that got me involved with them in the first place was they were absolutely saying that they could take certain types of plastic and they would be recycled. And I joined them and was with them for a bit of time until it became clear to me that that wasn't very clear what plastics were being recycled, how, where. There was no clear answer, and I got frustrated with them for other
I'm
reasons.
gonna cut you off. We're gonna move on. We'll put.
Okay,
Rick on
sorry.
there.
Sorry, okay.
Bella,
Hands, Bella.
Bella.
Hi, I had a comment just about earlier when we were talking about thrifting. And I thrift all of my clothes, and there's like a lot of places in Shoreline that are like great to do that at, and in Kenmore. And at my school, we have thrift nights and it's kind of like it's a partnership between our fashion club and then like the ASB. And it's just we advertise it for a couple weeks and everyone donates a bunch of clothes they don't have or don't use. And then we use it as like a fundraiser. So we will sell clothes between like $1 to $10 kind of. But someone like brought up the farmer's market, and I feel like there could be a few easy ways to like have something similar or encourage people to buy secondhand clothes through like a community event similar to the farmer's market or like off to the side of the farmer's market.
Do like
That's all.
like not garage sales, but like giveaways. We did used to do this reuse event, but everyone just brought their stuff down and no one took away. We cut that one out. There are ways to do that in like neighborhoods.
Mhm.
Address that problem, then maybe we should do that.
Okay, somebody else, Brian, did you have your hand up?
Well, I just had a quick question. I just wasn't sure. Are the restaurants on Third Place Commons, do they have restrictions on like their containers? Like, for instance, is styrofoam banned? Can they not have plastic utensils and things like that? I mean, is there any kind of ban that I'm not aware of?
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things we were gonna look at, Brian. We just haven't gotten there yet.
Has to be composted.
It has to be compostable, Brian,
Has to be, okay.
and Third Place. But,
So styrofoam's banned then.
yeah.
Yeah.
But they close their kitchen, that's. Okay. Corey. You're up. Oh, Corey, so,
I think
okay.
this section should come from you guys too.
Well, why is your name there? Okay, let's go to Natural Systems. Brian
Is it
and
because Sarah wrote your name there?
I wrote your name there. Brian and Daniel. You want to talk about your section?
Sure. So I guess I was just putting in some actions because I was kind of filling them in up above. I forgot about putting them down here. So I was just transferring some things in here. Some things were already here, I believe, from Mimi put some things in here. Obviously, the two big strategies are to increase our tree canopy, but mainly creating some kind of urban forestry core team, which I think is pretty important. Seattle did that in 2020. And it's just another sort of I believe I'm pretty sure it's citizen run, but I'm not sure if it's elected or not, but it seems like they have the task of really making sure that certain policies are made or influenced and carried out. And because obviously one of the big tasks, I think right now I would say our arborist is probably overrun. I don't think they're going to get any more time to add into a some kind of climate action for our urban forests. I don't know. I could be wrong, but it seems like another additional body would be great because, as far as being able to protect bigger trees, stands of trees, smart planting, trees that are going to be good carbon sequesters over long periods of time. Being able to do proper maintenance of trees so that as climate change disasters happen, they're more resilient to survive those type of events. Those kinds of things are all kind of addressed by this core team. So I thought that is a good one to kind of to go off of. I also think it's a good way of putting in actions for expanding our tree cover, especially to increase access for people into green spaces. There's a big link between citizen health, longevity, ailment, avoiding ailments when you have natural systems that you can constantly visit. So I think there's a big economic value there for the city and the people of Lake Forest Park. And the last action would be just to, I think we have to have something in there that expands our urban forest, especially into areas where there are, people with that are more impoverished or maybe don't have the ability or the room to plant trees. We should be able to have the city to be, one of the big actions is to try and increase their tree cover. So all those things are pretty tied into some pretty big actions. For the stream, maintaining the increased protection of urban streams and their riparian zones. A lot of it has to do with the new stormwater plan that we're going to be developing. In particularly, I'm pretty sure this new stormwater plan that's going to be coming out this year. I believe Andrew Sylvia is the one working on that, and that's going to be improving a lot of the way that our stormwater is dealt with, as well as getting rid of infrastructure that is pretty detrimental, replacing those kinds of things. Restoring, I put about 4 more actions in here. One of them, these are 4 critical ones that have been shown to really keep streams healthy and resilient. Actually, I put a 5th one in there, but that's just for me. But these 4 are pretty important for maintaining stream resilience during climate change. So get rid of channelized areas. I don't think we have too many channelized areas. I was just trying to think off the top of my head if we have any that are really highly channelized, maybe more towards, Bothell Way. We might have some channelized. I know that's a real difficult area to deal with, but trying to replace those with more natural type of substrates. A big one that we have really dropped the ball a lot on is maintaining riparian zones. These are vegetation that's associated specifically with streams. If we want to keep our streams cool, that's the best way to do it. It also helps filter and provide habitat, adds nutrients. They've shown that salmon returning to any creek, 30% of the nutrients ends up within the trees in the riparian zone that surround it. So there's a really close link between the species of an herb of any kind of creek and the riparian zone. And the hyperrheic zone, this is something I'm sure gives a smile to Tracy's face, because this is an article that we read not too long ago. This is just basically in areas where we can. The hyperrheic zone is essentially the soil and the geomorphology that surrounds the creek that is actually closely tied to the health of it, especially with the biological aspects of it. So they've shown that just replacing that and getting rid of non-pervious areas around the creek is a huge way of making them more resilient. And maintaining biological stream health is also a big one, because that tells us a lot about what's going on directly within the creeks. And then my last, which is a favorite of mine, I say we've got to really push for this. This is reintroducing our kokanee back into our urban creeks, because these are little tiny landlocked sockeye that once were incredibly abundant within our creeks and streams. And we all know what a crucial keystone species a lot of salmon are. And I've got a feeling that we've left a big chunk of our keystone culture out of our creeks because we no longer have these little kokanee. And I've got a feeling that they're gonna put a valuable piece of a puzzle back into the resiliency of our creeks. So I think it's something we should really push for. And it's going to make our streams that much more hardened to withstand the onslaught of climate change. Under 7 minutes.
Perfect. Perfect.
He's looking at a watch.
I don't know. I stopped my timer. Okay. Again, if there are notes, put them in the side in the collection and we'll look at those.
Dana can answer the side notes. She's been, you have that.
There you go.
I just added one to the site, so there you go.
There you go. Okay, community resilience and preparedness. Who's talking?
I guess I have to. So Tamara,
Thank you, Mimi.
is going to weigh in on this. So I went to town. I basically harvested stuff mostly from Shoreline and Kenmore because they've done a lot of research and work into resilience and what's going to happen in the future. And I did some adaptation to our city, but not much. So some of the goals, so the language is not mine, it's mostly theirs. Increasing community resilience to current and future impacts, kind of the goals, strengthening emergency preparedness, increased community awareness, integrated policies into city planning. Some things I did insert that will lessen the impacts of future climate impacts and partner and collaborate with neighboring cities in developing preparedness and other impact planning. Some of the challenges that equity and engagement. So equity through all the populations in our community and engagement, getting people plugged in. I think at our booth, people like to pick up seat packets and pencils, but getting them to actually engage in the conversation. Hopefully they went home and scanned the codes and learn something and they'll come back next time, but engagement is a challenge, I think. So some of the priorities center most vulnerable communities, vulnerable members of our community. This is language from Shoreline, probably. Plan for and educate the community on climate change and hazards. Implement resilience actions such as creating cooling centers and resilience hubs. I harvested what resilience hubs were and pasted it down there. And clearly define goals and ways partnerships between individuals, communities, and the city will help us attain those goals and sort of advertise that to everyone. I think it's important to show people that we're all working together towards a common goal. So some of the strategies, these are basically from Shoreline. So I don't know if I should even ensure that new buildings, land use decisions, and public infrastructure improvements increase resilience. So some of the targets and actions are there. I don't know. Maybe you just want to read it and put in comments over time. I tried to put in sort of a vision for how long we should, our goal for how long it should take us to accomplish a goal. And I was just kind of hand waving, hoping that we could have sort of a mind meld amongst ourselves about what it might take to do some of these things.
Interesting.
How many events do we want to have in a year? And I think we've had that conversation and we can insert it in here.
Well, one of the things I've been thinking about is whether we ought to begin as we're writing this part of the report, if we ought to begin simultaneously during public education forms of whatever. I'm of course for the low hanging fruit things we could do easily, but at the end of this, that's a conversation I'd like to have at the end of this part of the meeting is what do we need to do that could move both things?
I think a lot of the sections have educational goals. in
Yes.
them. So if we just put those all together and we can decide what we are capable of doing now.
Yes.
And what we need to work on. We could come up with a plan.
Yep. Okay. That's, yes, if we looked at the public education piece.
So some of the things I said in here, a lot of it is working with Kenmore and Shoreline to put our heads together around certain things where I thought it was appropriate. I wrote it in here. Yeah, so I don't know.
Okay,
There's a lot of words here, and so I just feel like maybe people can process on their own.
okay, there's a lot of stuff here. Great.
Here's one of the last near the end. By 2025, all Lake Forest Park citizens are aware of the work of our committee and incentives available for energy and home improvements that address climate, from purchasing clean vehicles to making your home energy efficient. All Lake Forest Park
There we go.
citizens.
Every
That's what I
single
meant.
one of them. Yeah. Okay,
Anyway,
all right. So, okay, so you're, all right, I think that's where we are. But, yeah, do people have their hand? No. Okay. So I want to raise this issue about some sort of two things rolling at the same time, continuing to write the climate action plan and beginning to do some public education. I want to raise that. And not my idea was we could, easy stuff, I mean, real easy. If we started our meeting 45 minutes early and it wasn't mandatory attendance, and we had somebody do, I mean, the guy, I feel like I know a guy. The Physicians for Social Responsibility have done a thing on gas stoves. It's a half hour. If the guy couldn't come, it's online and we could just show it. That would be easy there, but whether we want to have it here or what we want to do with it, but I'd like to hear what people are thinking about what we could do to begin the public education process on the things we know are going to be part of this, no matter how it rolls out. Uh-oh, radio silence.
Well, I think also like creating sort of a library of like the sheet you created for like the rebate programs and maybe like a link to other movies. Just creating a library on your guys' webpage and being able to bring that out to the community is, well, it's a good start. But those workshops too.
Okay.
Which is, I hate to say this because I dislike it myself, but we should be using social media more effectively. And we should be putting out 3-minute talks on some of these topics, something that people can just sort of sit there while waiting for the bus or whatever and take a look at, right? So I like your idea of having more in-depth things like 45-minute things, but honestly, remember our feedback from our comments, from our survey. People want stuff they can do like right there where they're standing, right? You know, so we need to meet them at that point.
We have like the e-news too, you can still do those monthly articles.
Right.
But like they say, it takes someone like 7 times to see something to start comprehending, so
I had never heard that.
social media.
Me in physics.
You know, if we could have a hub, like a physical hub, not just a website, like that in the town center, there's that new art box.
Yeah.
Like if we could have a little box where having it, but
I'm sure
maybe
the library would be able to post some sort of,
We would have to commit to keeping it fresh, right? That's part of it.
right.
And that'd be like, you know, a member of this committee every month does refreshes display in some way, right? So it is a bit of a.
Yeah, it's work, but all of the stuff.
We have volunteers out there, right?
Yeah.
That's right.
People that
I
want
said they
to go.
wanted to do that.
And the more they get to know about it, the more volunteers.
All right. Well, let's think about this. I'll take Mamie's suggestion and look through and see where we've had public education and send that out to you. So, and then see where we are. I find it overwhelming to sort of take on a new responsibility, but my sense is that these things have to go on at the same time. So let's pull back to, what time is it? 15 minutes. Okay, one thing I wanted to say was, this is just, was that the Commons breakfast, the Climate Action Committee is being honored at the Third Place Commons breakfast. I just want to tell you what that means. That means that at some point after they've done whatever their speeching is, somebody gets up and says, hooray for the Climate Action Committee. And they give us a certificate or they show us a plaque where our name will go on. And it's not a big deal, except it is a big, I mean, it's a big deal, but it's not a big talking. So I think what we'll do is we'll all go up on stage and say, this is the Climate Action Committee, and thank you very much. But we have an opportunity to put something on everyone's plate. So Tamara, where are you? That's Tamara, we gotta get one thing out to them. We have one thing we can put on their plates.
Like literally put on their plates?
Literally. At their place setting.
Well,
Well, at their place setting, we can put something out on the table about us.
Okay.
So we
about
should,
us or about,
or about them, or whatever. We can put anything we want on there.
is
So
there
we
gonna
should
be
think about
time
it.
for discussion at the tables?
No, I mean, there'll be chatter at the table, but
So
we're,
could we put things that would have people at the table discussing
No.
That's a good idea.
little, like everybody have a different item that they could do or something, and then
Mm-hmm.
getting them talking about
climate.
climate.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Tamara's working on that. The comms committee.
I love that idea, Dana.
Yeah, something, it would be intriguing.
A link to
We
that.
will, let me just say, the other thing is, all of you who I have invited to be my guest do not have to pay for their table because I have purchased this table, which is my contribution to Third Place Commons. It's a fundraiser. They're going to ask you for money. So if you feel guilty, you could write a check for the cost of a ticket or whatever. But you don't have to. You're coming as a guest. So, yeah. So that's all the common stuff. Are there any questions about that?
Yeah, what time do you think we should arrive?
Sorry.
Say what?
There you go.
No, I was just gonna say the thing that you've been assigned, it could have to do with food, since we're eating breakfast. So the top could be something to do with climate and food that you have them talk about. What, I don't know, but yeah.
Well, everything gets picked up from the table and gets composted. We could ask if people know where the compost goes.
We could have a set of different, like, how many people are at a table? 10?
Right.
I'm also
So-
gonna say, these are people who probably have more funds than most, and getting electric stuff on their brain is probably a good group to push that.
Oh, you mean electrify everything?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like, I think that's probably a better group to get the brain clicking, something like that, but.
Okay, I just want you to think about that. Are you good with that, Tamara? I'm just throwing these. I know you're,
This is
you've got a new.
Next month,
Yes, yeah, it's in 25 days.
It's this month.
So this
right,
month.
this is this month.
Now, how many tables and how many people are there? Do you know that?
But I guess 125 people will be there.
I like the idea of having like a question, in front of everyone's place setting. Like it could be, ask other people at your table, what, they currently do to, I don't know, encourage pollinators. I mean, you could just come up with some questions and then we can have, I don't know, however many people are at tables, we can recycle the same questions and just, to Dana's point, create conversations about these topics.
And then there's also mingling at different tables to visit with our friends and neighbors. And there's a chance for some conversation in that way.
Yeah, you could even say like,
Table, so you have the electric table and the transportation table and the food table or whatever.
That's
And a
very
little
interesting.
question.
Yeah, they all get a little centerpiece that represents their theme.
Yeah,
You know, you might be too hard.
Now we're never gonna do it, because it's too hard.
Yeah.
but all you need are just
But you
For
could
each
do.
table,
a
8
little-
things,
Yeah,
8 little questions.
questions. You could have,
around
I think
the-
it's not a bad idea about, what do you know about EVs? What do you know about recycling or whatever? I think that's kind of intriguing. Okay,
Yeah. And say like, ask one person from your table and one person from a different table. If you want to encourage mingling and conversation amongst tables.
well, there's not.
Sort
gonna-
of.
Once the place opens at 7, the
Mhm.
dinner, breakfast is served at 7:30. You're sitting at a table from 7:30 to 8:30.
But
Your
there's
table.
there's a program
There's a
going on.
program. I think.
So there's only a few little minutes.
Before and after.
It's kind of a nice icebreaker to have things that people can introduce themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe it's some tables, they all know each other, but still.
Yeah.
Thing to talk about.
What's one electric thing you have switched out and what's your like next, like what's on your next?
Right, or what do you know about the rebates that are coming
So-
through?
Right.
So are these like little strips of paper or something like?
Mhm.
I'm
Okay.
thinking like a fortune.
Put like a QR code on it with the question or something.
Okay, do you feel like you have enough juice in there, Cameron, to get the comms committee thinking?
Sure. Yeah, I can send email out. I guess everyone like send ideas of questions.
Okay.
Maybe I can create a Google Doc and we can
That's okay.
Okay,
put questions on there.
terrific.
But yeah, like we can do like a little piece of paper and then we can also maybe include like, here's a QR code to our, Climate Action Committee website.
Okay,
So then, Sarah, what time should we arrive then?
well, if you had them out. Oh, I don't know the answer to that. I'm talking with Amy Wittenberg Thursday about this and I'll make sure. I think if we had them available, they would, when they're setting up the tables, they would put them on for us.
Okay. So Corey, is that something? Do you think you could print them out? That'd be a lot of work though to cut in little strips, right? Do you have an easy way to cut strips of paper?
I'll get help, but
You could do
Don't worry
this business cards that are perforated and just have it be a little square and rip them apart.
yeah, we'll see. We can figure it
Yeah.
out.
Mhm.
I'll take care of it. Okay, now I'd like to.
For you,
Okay.
Corey.
What else is- Okay, oh, the other thing I wanted to say was, we are doing a book club. We're sponsoring a book club, and it meets tomorrow, and we read chapters from when we've been doing this before. It's all you can save. We go from 6 to 7 and remain in the commons, and anybody who wants to come is welcome to come. You don't have to have read the book to join our conversation, but it's one of the things that sort of slipped by us. But it's an interesting group. I wanted to reinforce that. So now I want to circle back in the next 7 minutes and say, what do we need to do now with this report?
I think, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we have like, Sarah, you assign people randomly a part that they haven't done and just for them to review that part and provide some kind of comment back. Because I feel like we're all doing our own work and we're all whittling things away,
Okay,
but I haven't had really a chance to look at other people's stuff yet. Maybe
Right.
that would be.
terrific. Okay, is there anybody who wants to take transportation to look at? Who's not Ann or me?
Yeah, I'll look at transpiration.
How do I know this is? I need to do a different color. Where are you? How do I make this? Would you do this? Can you fill this in?
On your computer?
Or on any?
Oh, yeah.
Your computer. Can you make it red and add Brian's in it?
Yeah.
Okay, who wants to look at the built environment?
Mm,
Anne is raising her hand. Can you make Anne red there? Yes,
Yes, please.
okay, terrific. How about consumption?
How did that work?
Okay, Tracy, got it? And the solid waste. Matt? Municipal operations. I'll do that. Okay, Sarah and
Good,
Ed.
because you know the city.
Natural
I guess I have to do that
Environment.
one, otherwise I have to do my own, so, you know.
natural environment.
That's me.
Oh, maybe, okay, maybe. And community resilience and preparedness.
I'll do that.
Linda, and did you volunteer too?
There's a lot, I wasn't volunteering, but I can't.
I
was
thought I
just
heard
gonna
your name.
Say that I haven't
Okay,
signed up for anything.
all right. This is big. Why don't you do that one? Add yourself. to that.
Sorry.
Which
Who
one?
else is doing that?
There's a
Okay, I'm
lot, and
confused.
there's a lot in there.
Dana,
In which one?
Okay,
very last one, community resilience and preparedness.
right, okay.
All right. Is it possible that we could get these done in 2 weeks? Sometime in the next 2 weeks, so that then we have something that's fuller that we can look at? More complete?
Let's just do it.
Yeah.
Tamara?
You know, it's,
She didn't look at it yet.
the other thing is,
I did it.
if you
And
get
like-
into trouble, I don't mean trouble, if you get into life happening to you, give me a call and we'll figure it out.
Bella's raising her hand.
Oh, great. Bella,
Hi, I'm just saying you can put me on any of those, whichever
Well,
one like needs.
you were gonna do some work on schools.
Okay, I'll keep doing that.
Okay, that'd be good to, and get it in there.
Or
What are the-
social media.
Or social media.
I thought we weren't allowed to do that.
City can't, but you can.
We'll talk offline. Yeah,
Okay.
but the school things, you were gonna look and see how they were doing stuff and we'd like that in there.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay. So if we had it, this is what I'm thinking, if we had it by the middle of May 15th or something, you'd had a chance to look at stuff and make it a little more fulsome. And then we still need to figure out how to transform this into a report. So that's what we're gonna talk about at the next meeting. How do we take this stuff and shape it? Looking at you, Matt. You're the shaper. Sort of figuring it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Let's do it.
It's a big job.
yeah. Well, at least maybe I'll give you a call and we'll talk about it.
I was just gonna say that maybe we should just start formatting it in a way that's, you know, following off of what Mimi was doing, just kind of follow the shoreline action plan or the Kenmore action plan. Just sort of we could start having some, you know, looks like it's not just a bunch of jumbled pieces together. It's actually a complete report.
I agree.
Everybody agrees, which the format. Let's pick one.
Might have to do a little bit of research on that.
Okay, we're gonna do a little bit of research on it.
Maybe that's what we come up with. Maybe that's our next meeting, is to figure out what format we want to go by.
Okay. Okay,
And so to be clear, the homework assignment is reviewing these sections, and we can start now proofing and editing, right?
yes,
Okay,
yes, yes. And then, so then there's gonna be, and Bella's gonna add a section on schools, which we wanted to add. And then at the next meeting, we'll share some of the formats from the sort of the 5.
We kind of started that though. Remember when the three of us started and created that outline and looked at, wasn't there one that we were leaning on that led to this?
What we were leaning on was Kenmore,
10 more.
yeah.
Yeah, and remember, a lot of their reports were put out by the consulting firm, right?
Yeah.
So we're not gonna have that level of firepower, but, you know, it doesn't mean that we can't. Are any of you graphic designers?
It was more the structure of it,
Yeah.
not necessarily that everything's graphically beautiful.
Right, but you wanna make it look somewhat appealing.
It helps to have.
Yeah, we're looking for a cartoon character that is ready kilowatt or whatever.
Nice.
It kind of does beg the question that Tracy brought up yeah, I think eventually we are going to have to hire somebody, right, to kind of put this into a graphically eye-catching piece report.
So I had a suggestion. So I been in touch with a consultant who does kind of like equity work. And asked if that was something that she could take a look at the whole report and just kind of weigh in on it from an equity lens. And she has a former student who does graphic design work. And so she'd be interested in kind of taking a look at it as well, which would be less expensive than hiring a professional. And she said she could include it all into one quote. So that was something that I was wondering what our budget is for something like that, to have a DEI sort of professional take a look at our plan and kind of analyze it from that lens, and also having a graphic design student take a look at it.
I think the hard part is that because we're spending the public's money, we can't say who's the consultant. We have to say, what's the job we want to have done? And then, is that right, Cory?
Yeah.
We have to describe the job we want done and then ask people to bid on.
Submit like we need RFPs, like an
Yeah.
RFP process.
I think so.
That's for big stuff though, right? Or is it pretty little stuff?
No, I think we could, let me look.
Okay, that's a really helpful suggestion.
Yes.
What we have to do is figure out how we can do it without stumbling on our legal requirements.
Yeah, because that was one of her questions as well, about potential contracting barriers.
Okay, so Cory's gonna look at that and see, but that doesn't mean that if others of you have contacts or some idea about how to proceed that way, that should throw that into the mix. Okay, so next month, we're gonna look at the how we take what we have done so far, make sure it's in a, and then talk about a format, or do we want to send out I'm confused about my own, what we're doing. We're gonna look at the Kenmore format and then see if we can't transform this into the Kenmore format.
It's not gonna fit exactly. I mean, we are different enough cities and different enough plans that it's not gonna quite fit.
So,
Maybe we make up our own. Maybe we brought enough of the others into what we've done so far. You just go from there.
okay, this is what I will do. I will look at the various structures of the reports that we have and bring those to you next month. And then we'll, maybe I'll send them out earlier so you can look at them in advance. And then we'll sort of, and I'll make a recommendation, then you can see if you like it. How about that? Okay. Is there anything else that we need to do for the good of the climate action? Yes.
Oh, for the plan.
Oh.
So that's what we could committee.
Okay, go to the committee.
Okay, I'm gonna call out Bella if she's still on the, you turn off the, sorry, yeah, she's still here. Yes, there you are, Bella. I'm gonna call you out a little bit. I'm gonna congratulate you on getting into Western. Congratulations. Make us proud. And
Thank you.
you also mentioned that you might have some members of the Climate Justice Club from your school interested in being serving on the committee.
Yeah, we had an officer meeting today, and I have 3 friends, and one of them is going to be the president of the club next year, and then 2 of them are going to be officers in the club. And I actually sent that email about like 10 minutes ago to Sarah with the names and the emails and the phone numbers. And none of them could make it tonight. I told them that they could come and like watch the meeting kind of. But they all were like pretty busy with other school stuff. This week is AP testing week, so there's a lot going on. But yeah, there's 3 people, and I have been floating the idea with a few more. The more the merrier is what I'm thinking, but we'll see.
Excellent.
Yes, that's so good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. I do think we're making progress. Yeah, and I also want to just say, I think you guys are fabulous. You really do. This is an enormous task. I don't know why we said yes to it. Usually everybody else got consultants doing this. We lost our minds, and in the midst of that, I just want to thank you for the efforts you're putting in. It really is important work. All right. Meeting adjourned.
Right, take
Thank
care.
you.
Y'all.